I was already struggling to stand when my sister grabbed my crutch. The metal scraped against my palm as she yanked it away, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. "Stop pretending," Claire said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're fine." I hit the floor hard. My injured knee exploded with pain. The cold tile pressed against my cheek as laughter erupted around me. Not strangers, but my own parents. My mother's voice cut through. "She always exaggerates." I lay there humiliated while my family stood over me like I was entertainment. No one offered a hand. No one told Claire to stop. They just laughed. What I didn't know was that someone else was watching from the shadows, someone who had seen everything Claire had done for months, someone who was already planning what would happen next. 3 weeks later, we sat in a lawyer's office for Grandpa's will reading. Claire smiled confidently, certain she'd won. Then the lawyer read the first line, and her smile vanished forever. "Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you?" My name is Danielle Foster. I'm 35 years old, and I've spent the last decade building a successful career as a financial consultant. I own my own apartment, drive a reliable car, and answer to no one but myself. Most people would call that independence. My family calls it luck. To understand what happened in that lawyer's office, I need to take you back 2 weeks earlier to a Sunday dinner at my grandfather's house that would set everything in motion. I had always been the invisible daughter, not because I was quiet or unremarkable, but because my family had decided long ago that I wasn't worth seeing. When I was 18, my parents told me I needed to move out so Claire could have my bedroom. She was 16 and wanted more space. They gave me 2 weeks to figure out my life. I found a tiny apartment, worked 2 jobs through college, and built everything I have from nothing. But in my family's version of history, abandoned them. I was the selfish one who left. Claire learned something important from watching that story take shape. She learned that truth doesn't matter, only the version that gets repeated. And she's been repeating her version ever since. My parents still called me when they needed money. They never called it borrowing because that would imply they intended to pay it back. When their roof leaked, I wrote a check. When Claire maxed out her credit cards, I quietly covered the payments through Grandpa so she wouldn't be embarrassed. They took everything I offered and somehow still believed I contributed nothing. I never corrected them. I told myself I was keeping the peace. Looking back, I was just making it easier for them to use me. In the months before Grandpa's health declined, I noticed something strange. Claire had started visiting him alone, weekly visits, sometimes twice a week. This was the same Claire who used to complain that his house smelled like old books and mothballs. Suddenly, she was his devoted granddaughter, bringing him homemade cookies and sitting by his chair for hours. I didn't know what she was telling him during those visits. I didn't know she was slowly poisoning his image of me. "I worry about Danielle," she would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "She only calls when she needs something. I don't think she really cares about family the way we do." What Claire didn't realize was that Grandpa Henry had spent 82 years learning to read people. He had been the rejected child in his own family, the youngest son who was expected to fail while his brothers inherited everything. He recognized manipulation because he had survived it himself. He also had a security camera in his living room. He'd installed it with a sensitive microphone after his hearing started to fade so he could review conversations he might have missed. Claire never noticed it. She was too busy performing. One evening, Grandpa pulled me aside while the others were distracted. His hand was warm on my arm, his eyes sharp despite his age. "You're like me when I was young," he said quietly. "But you won't have to wait until the end of your life to be seen." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. 2 weeks before he died, I injured my knee, helping an elderly woman who had fallen outside a grocery store. The doctor gave me a crutch and told me to stay off my feet as much as possible. When I showed up to Sunday dinner limping, I expected concern. I should have known better. Claire's eyes lit up the moment she saw the crutch. She spent the entire meal making comments loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still playing the victim, Danielle," she said. "You always did love attention." My parents laughed along because they always laughed along with Claire. I watched her watching Grandpa trying to gauge his reaction. She was testing something, building towards something. That night, she would make her move. She didn't know Grandpa had already made his. The attack came when I least expected it. Dinner had ended, and I was gathering my things to leave. My knee throbbed from sitting too long in the same position, and I gripped my crutch carefully as I stood. I just wanted to get to my car, get home, and ice my knee in peace. I should have known Claire wasn't finished. I had taken maybe 3 steps when I felt the crutch ripped from my hand. The motion was sharp and deliberate. Claire stood behind me, holding my crutch like a trophy. Her face twisted into that familiar sneer. "Stop faking it," she said loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "You can walk fine." I didn't have time to catch myself. My injured knee buckled instantly, and I crashed to the hardwood floor. The pain was blinding. It shot up my leg and into my spine, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I lay there on my grandfather's floor, my cheek pressed against the cold wood, my hands shaking as I tried to push myself up. And then I heard the laughter. Not just Claire, my parents. My mother's voice cut through the fog of pain like a knife. "She always exaggerates," she said, and I could hear the amusement in her tone. "Look at her down there. So dramatic." I managed to lift my head. My father stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed, smirking. My mother sat on the couch, shaking her head like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Claire stood over me, still holding my crutch, looking down at me with something close to satisfaction. In the corner of the room, my young cousin Emma started to cry. She was only 7 years old, and she had just watched her aunt get attacked while the adults laughed. No one comforted her. No one even looked at her. They were too busy enjoying my humiliation. I pulled myself up using the edge of a chair. The pain in my knee was excruciating, but I refused to stay on the floor. I took my crutch back from Claire without a word. She let me have it, her performance complete. I limped toward the door, and not a single person asked if I was okay. As I reached the hallway, I heard Claire whisper to our mother. She thought I was out of earshot, but the house was quiet, and her voice carried. "See, I told you she was faking. Now Grandpa saw it too. He'll know who really deserves to be in this family." I kept walking. I made it to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and cried for 20 minutes before I could see well enough to drive home. What I didn't know was that Claire's victory celebration was just beginning. After I left, she stayed in Grandpa's living room. She was feeling invincible, certain that she had finally destroyed my credibility in the one place it mattered. She pulled out her phone and called her best friend. She didn't bother going to another room. She didn't lower her voice. Why would she? In her mind, she had already won. "Hey, it's done," she said, pacing near the window. I finally exposed her in front of everyone, including Grandpa. She fell on the floor like an idiot. "The inheritance is basically mine now." She laughed at something her friend said. Then she hung up and rejoined the family, beaming with confidence. She never noticed the small camera mounted in the corner of Grandpa's bookshelf. She didn't know about the sensitive microphone he had installed because his hearing had declined. She had no idea that every word she spoke had been recorded with perfect clarity. Grandpa Henry had watched the entire scene from behind the kitchen door. He saw Claire yank my crutch. He saw me fall. He heard my parents laugh. And when Claire made that phone call, he heard every damning word. That night, after everyone left, Grandpa sat alone in his study and reviewed the footage. His hands shook as he watched it, but not from age. He was grieving for me, for the family. He thought he knew for the granddaughter he had hoped might be different. He watched Claire's phone call 3 times. Then he picked up his own phone and called his lawyer. "I need to update my will immediately," he said, "and I need you to see something." The next morning, Grandpa called me. He asked me to come over alone, and his voice had an urgency I had never heard before. When I arrived, he sat me down in his study and closed the door. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "I've seen enough," he said. "I need you to trust me. Justice will come." He didn't tell me about the video. Later I would understand why. He knew that if I found out what he had recorded, I would confront Claire. I would give her a chance to spin another story to play the victim, to turn our parents against me even further. He needed to protect the evidence until it could be used properly. Instead, he asked me to share my experiences. Every incident I could remember, every cruel word, every stolen moment, every time I had been blamed for something Claire did. He recorded my testimony on his phone, asking gentle questions, letting me talk until I had nothing left. When I left his house that day, something had shifted inside me. For the first time in 35 years, I recognized the truth about my family. My silence hadn't kept the peace. It had enabled the abuse. Every time I stayed quiet to avoid conflict, I taught them that they could treat me however they wanted without consequences. I had been so focused on being the good daughter that I forgot I deserved to be treated like a human being. That night, I started a journal. I wrote down every incident I could remember going back years. Dates, locations, exact words when I could recall them. I wasn't planning revenge. I was trying to preserve my own sanity. I wrote on the first page, "If I don't record the truth, they'll rewrite it like they always do." I didn't know that Grandpa was building the same case with video evidence. I didn't know that his lawyer had already seen the footage and was drafting new documents. I only knew that for the first time, someone believed me. 2 weeks later, Grandpa died of a sudden heart attack. I got the call in the middle of a workday. I left my office and drove to his house in a daze, hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't. He was gone. The one person in my family who truly saw me had left this world, and I had never felt more alone. The funeral was 3 days later. I stood by his coffin for a long time, looking at his peaceful face, remembering his words. "You won't have to wait until the end of your life to be seen." I didn't understand yet what he had meant. I only knew that I had lost my only ally. Claire barely pretended to grieve. I watched her whisper to our mother during the service, and I caught fragments of her words. "Finally, now we can move forward. How much do you think he left?" She was already calculating her share. She was already spending money she assumed would be hers. After the burial, the family gathered at our parents' house to discuss the estate. They talked about Grandpa's house, his savings, his investments. They divided everything in their minds without a single thought about what he might have wanted. I sat apart from them, silent, watching Claire smile and laugh like she had won a prize. I made a promise to myself that day, standing in that room full of people who had never loved me. "I will live worthy of your faith in me, Grandpa." The will reading was scheduled for the following week. Claire walked into that lawyer's office with her head held high, confident that her months of scheming had paid off. She had no idea that Grandpa's final gift to me was already waiting. The lawyer's office was cold and sterile, with leather chairs arranged in a semicircle facing a mahogany desk. I arrived early because I couldn't sit at home anymore. The grief was suffocating, and I needed something to focus on, even if it was just listening to legal documents being read aloud. I expected nothing from this meeting. Grandpa had loved me, but I assumed he had divided his estate fairly among everyone. That was who he was: fair, kind, thoughtful. Claire arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in an expensive black dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She walked in like she owned the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. My parents followed behind her, equally polished, equally confident. Claire sat down across from me and crossed her legs, barely glancing in my direction. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her purse, but I could tell it wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. She was excited. I later learned that Claire was over $80,000 in debt. Her lifestyle had finally caught up with her, and she was counting on this inheritance to solve everything. In her mind, she had already won. She had spent months positioning herself as the devoted granddaughter while poisoning Grandpa against me. She had publicly humiliated me in front of the family. She was certain that today would be her coronation. I sat quietly in my chair, still wearing the same black dress I had worn to the funeral. I wasn't thinking about money or houses or inheritance. I was thinking about how much I missed him, how much I wished I could hear his voice one more time. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened a folder on his desk. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, and he looked uncomfortable before he even began speaking. "Before we proceed with the formal reading," he said, "Mr. Henry left specific instructions. He requested that I read his exact words before anything else." Claire leaned forward slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She was ready for her moment. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began to read. "Those who laugh at another's pain are not worthy of receiving anything from me, and those who scheme in shadows will find themselves exposed in light." The smile disappeared from Claire's face. I saw her shoulders stiffen, saw her glance quickly at our parents. The word scheme hung in the air like smoke, but she recovered quickly, forcing her expression back to neutral. There was no way he could have known. She had been so careful. The lawyer continued. "Mr. Henry also left video evidence to accompany his will. He asked that it be played in full before the terms are read." A screen on the wall flickered to life, and suddenly I was looking at Grandpa's living room. The footage was clear and sharp, captured from a camera I had never noticed in all my years of visiting his house. The timestamp showed the date of that terrible dinner. I watched myself stand up from the couch, reaching for my crutch. I watched Claire move behind me, and then I watched her yank the crutch from my hand with deliberate force. I watched myself crash to the floor. I heard my own cry of pain through the speakers, and I heard my parents laughing in the background. My mother's voice came through clearly. She always exaggerates. The room was completely silent. I couldn't look at anyone. I just stared at the screen, reliving the worst moment of my life, from a perspective I had never seen before. But the video didn't stop. The next clip showed Claire whispering to our mother after I had limped out of the room. "See, I told you she was faking. Now Grandpa saw it too." Claire's face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Then came the phone call. Claire stood in Grandpa's living room, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a loud and confident voice. "Hey, it's done. I finally exposed her in front of everyone, including Grandpa. She fell on the floor like an idiot. The inheritance is basically mine now." She laughed on the recording. The sound echoed through the lawyer's office like a gunshot. I looked at Claire. She looked like she was going to be sick. Her carefully constructed mask had shattered completely, and underneath was nothing but raw terror. The screen changed one final time. Grandpa's face appeared recorded from the same camera. He looked directly into the lens, and even through the screen, I could feel the weight of his gaze. "Claire," he said, "I watched you visit me these past months. You never once asked how I was feeling, only about my will, my plans, my assets. You told me lies about Danielle, that she only calls when she needs something, that she doesn't care about family. I knew they were lies because I was the one Danielle sent money through to help all of you, but I wanted to see how far you would go." I felt my heart stop. He knew. He had always known. "That night with the crutch," Grandpa continued, "I saw everything. I heard everything. You didn't attack your sister out of anger. You planned it. You wanted to make her look like a liar in front of me. You thought you were clever, but I've been watching manipulators my whole life. I was surrounded by them in my own family when I was young. I know exactly what you are, and I will not reward it." The screen went dark. The lawyer let the silence hang for a moment before picking up another document. "The will contains the following exclusion clause," he said. "Any individual who participated in the deliberate scheme to harm Danielle Foster's reputation or physical well-being, as documented in the attached video evidence, is permanently and irrevocably excluded from all inheritance. This includes any individual who laughed at, encouraged, or failed to intervene during the documented assault." Claire shot to her feet. "This is entrapment," she screamed. "He set me up. He recorded me without my consent." The lawyer remained calm. Mr. Henry anticipated this response. He included the following statement. He read from the page. "If Claire claims entrapment, remind her I didn't force her to grab her sister's crutch. I didn't force her to lie about Danielle to my face for months. I didn't force her to brag on the phone about securing an inheritance before I was even dead. I simply documented her revealing who she truly is. That is not entrapment. That is evidence." Claire collapsed back into her chair, speechless. "For the record," the lawyer added, "Mr. Henry had every legal right to record inside his own home. Additionally, Danielle's personal journal, which Mr. Henry discovered and verified, has been added as corroborating evidence of a pattern of mistreatment spanning 15 years. My journal. He had found my journal and used it to support his case. Even from beyond the grave, he was protecting me. The lawyer turned to the final page. There is one more truth Mr. Henry wished to reveal. He explained that for 10 years I had secretly sent money to help my family through Grandpa, over $50,000 total, home repairs when their roof started leaking, Claire's credit card debt when she nearly filed for bankruptcy, our mother's medication and medical bills. The family had always believed this money came from Grandpa. "The daughter you called selfish and attention-seeking," the lawyer read, "has been quietly saving this family for a decade while asking for nothing in return. The daughter you championed has been scheming to steal from the very person who kept her afloat. Now you know the truth about both of them." My father sat frozen, his face gray. My mother sobbed into her hands. Claire stared at the table, and I watched something break behind her eyes. She had schemed to destroy me, and I had been secretly saving her the entire time. I sat in my chair with tears rolling down my face, but they weren't tears of victory. I was crying because I wished Grandpa could see this moment. I was crying because the truth had finally been spoken, and it had cost me the only person who ever believed in me. But what I did next would prove that I was nothing like them, and that terrified Claire most of all. Everyone expected me to be cruel. After the will reading, after the video, after 15 years of abuse, finally exposed in that cold lawyer's office, everyone assumed I would take my revenge. They thought I would throw my parents out of their home immediately. They thought I would humiliate Claire publicly, make her suffer the way she had made me suffer. They were waiting for me to become the monster they had always pretended I was, but I refused to give them that satisfaction. 2 weeks after the will reading, I called a family meeting. Not at Grandpa's house, which now belonged to me, but at a neutral location. A quiet coffee shop where we could talk without the weight of all those memories pressing down on us. My parents arrived looking small and defeated. Claire came too, though she sat as far from me as possible and wouldn't meet my eyes. I had spent those 2 weeks thinking about what Grandpa would want me to do. He had given me power, but power without wisdom is just cruelty with better resources. I didn't want to become the person my family had always accused me of being. I wanted to become the person Grandpa believed I could be. So I set boundaries instead of punishments. I told my parents they had 6 months to find new housing. I would provide initial rent assistance to help them get settled somewhere affordable. They wouldn't be homeless, but they also wouldn't be living in a house I now owned while pretending nothing had happened. They needed to build their own life separate from the one they had built on my silence. I told Claire she would receive no financial support from me. None. She was 32 years old and had never truly taken care of herself. It was time for her to learn what independence actually meant. I told all of them that any future contact had to be based on genuine respect. One incident of manipulation, one cruel comment, one attempt to rewrite history, and I would walk away permanently. No second chances after this one. My mother started to cry. My father stared at the table. Claire just looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. Hatred, maybe, or fear. "I'm not doing to you what you did to me," I said, "but I'm also done being your victim. These are boundaries, not punishments. The difference is that boundaries protect me. Punishments would only poison me." I left the coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. I had finally spoken my truth, and I hadn't had to become a villain to do it. Claire's downfall happened faster than I expected. Someone at the law office had leaked video of her meltdown during the will reading. I never found out who, but within days, footage of Claire screaming about entrapment, while evidence of her scheming played on screen, was circulating through her entire social circle. The friends she had cultivated so carefully, the ones who only valued her for her projected wealth and status, disappeared overnight. No one returned her calls. No one answered her texts. The people she had spent years impressing suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. Her boyfriend left her via text message. He had been waiting for her inheritance to fund their lifestyle together, and now that the money was gone, so was he. "I didn't sign up for this kind of drama," he wrote. "Good luck." The $80,000 in debt she had been counting on the inheritance to cover now had no solution. She had to sell her luxury apartment and most of her possessions, designer bags, expensive jewelry, the sports car she couldn't actually afford. All of it went to pay creditors who didn't care about her excuses. She moved into a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood she used to mock when we drove through it. She applied for jobs, but her reputation preceded her. Hiring managers had seen the video. No one wanted to employ the woman who had physically attacked her disabled sister and then bragged about securing an inheritance. She couldn't even get callbacks for entry-level positions. The woman who had always believed she was the smartest person in every room discovered that intelligence means nothing when no one trusts you. 3 weeks after the will reading, the lawyer called me. There was a private package that Grandpa had specified should be delivered separately after the initial shock had passed. I drove to his office that afternoon not knowing what to expect. Inside the package was a small velvet box. I opened it and found my grandmother's wedding ring. It was simple and elegant, a thin gold band with a modest diamond that caught the light beautifully. Everyone in my family had assumed this ring would go to Claire. She was the golden grandchild, after all. She was the one who deserved the family heirlooms. But Grandpa had given it to me. With the ring was a handwritten letter in his familiar, careful script. I sat in my car in the parking lot and read it through tears. "My dear Danielle," he wrote, "this ring belonged to my mother, a woman who was underestimated and overlooked by her family her entire life. She gave it to me because I was the only one who truly saw her worth. Now I give it to you for the same reason. I was the rejected child once. I spent 40 years watching others receive love I had earned but never received. I know that wound. I didn't want you to carry it as long as I did. I must confess something. I knew about Claire's scheme for months. I knew she was poisoning your name during her visits. I didn't warn you because I needed her to feel safe enough to reveal her true nature completely. If I had told you, you might have confronted her, and she would have become careful. I needed undeniable proof for the lawyers, yes, but more importantly for your parents. They needed to see with their own eyes who their daughters really are. I'm sorry for that silence. I hope you can forgive an old man for being strategic when he should have been comforting. Be strong, my girl. But don't let bitterness poison your beautiful heart. Your sister is already destroyed by her own choices. You don't need to add to it. The best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. I love you. I always saw you. Grandpa." I sat in that parking lot and cried for an hour, not from pain this time, but from being truly seen. Even in death, he was still protecting me, still teaching me, still loving me. A month later, Claire appeared at my door. I almost didn't recognize her. No makeup, unwashed hair, clothes that didn't match. The polished woman who had always looked down on me was gone. In her place stood someone broken and desperate. "I need help," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm drowning. I have nothing left. I can't get a job. I can't pay rent. I have nowhere to go." I looked at my sister for a long moment. Then I spoke not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with calm clarity. "For 15 years, I needed help. Where were you? When I was pushed out of my own room at 18 so you could have more space, did you speak up for me? When you spent months telling Grandpa I was selfish and didn't care about family, did you think about what that would do to me? When you grabbed my crutch and watched me fall, did you consider that I was a person who could feel pain? You didn't just ignore me, Claire. You actively worked to destroy me. You schemed for months. You were proud of yourself." Tears streamed down her face. She had no defense. "I'm not going to save you," I continued. "Not because I want revenge, but because saving you wouldn't actually help you. You've spent your whole life manipulating people into giving you things. You need to learn how to be a real person who earns things. That only happens when there's no one left to manipulate. If you genuinely change, not perform change, but actually become different, maybe we can talk someday. But that's up to you, not me." I closed the door quietly. Not a slam, just a firm boundary. 1 year later, a letter arrived. It was the third one Claire had sent, but the first I would actually read. I held the envelope in my hands for a long time before opening it. The first 2 letters from Claire had gone straight into the trash without being read. I wasn't interested in her excuses or her manipulation or whatever new angle she was trying to work, but something made me pause this time. Maybe it was Grandpa's words, echoing in my mind about not letting bitterness poison my heart. Maybe I was just ready. I opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Danielle," the letter began. "I don't expect you to read this. You didn't read my other letters, and I understand why. But I need to write it anyway. I've been in therapy for 8 months now. It took me 4 months of complete freefall before I was desperate enough to ask for help. I've had to face things about myself that I spent my whole life avoiding. My therapist asked me a question that broke me. She asked why I needed to crush my sister to feel valuable. I didn't have an answer. I cried for an hour. The truth is I was terrified. Deep down, I always knew I wasn't special. I wasn't smarter or kinder or more talented than you. The only way I could feel like I mattered was by making sure you didn't. If you were seen, I would become invisible, so I made sure you stayed small. I told myself you deserved it. I told myself I was smarter. I told myself I was winning. I was wrong about everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for money. I just need you to know that I finally see what I did. Not because I got caught, not because I lost, but because I've had to sit with myself for a year without anyone to manipulate or blame. I hurt you for years, on purpose, and I'm sorry. I don't know if that matters anymore, but it's the truth. Claire. This letter felt different from anything Claire had ever written or said to me. There was no manipulation hidden between the lines, no subtle request for money or help, no attempt to make me feel guilty for her suffering. Just accountability, just truth. But I had learned not to trust words. I needed evidence. Over the following weeks, I quietly investigated. I asked careful questions to people who might know. What I discovered surprised me. My father had returned to work for the first time in over a decade. It was a modest job at a hardware store, nothing glamorous, but he was actually earning money instead of expecting it from others. A neighbor told me he had said he was trying to become someone his daughter could respect. My mother had started volunteering 3 days a week at a community center. She told the coordinator she was learning what it means to give instead of just take. And Claire had worked the same retail job for 10 months. She lived in a small apartment she paid for with her own money. She hadn't asked anyone for help. A former mutual friend mentioned that at a party, someone had tried to get Claire to badmouth me. Claire had simply said she doesn't talk about her sister and walked away. The change was slow and imperfect. Some weeks they backslid into old patterns, then caught themselves. But it was happening. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if people could actually change. In the year since the will reading, I had built something beautiful for myself. My consulting firm had expanded, and I was respected in my field for my actual expertise and integrity, not for who my family was or wasn't. I lived in Grandpa's house, now transformed into a warm home, filled with his photographs and his books. The living room where Claire had grabbed my crutch looked completely different. I had redecorated every inch of it because I refused to let that memory define the space where I spent my evenings. On my office wall hung the crutch itself, not as a wound and not as a trophy, but as a reminder. This is where I stopped being invisible. This is where I decided I deserved better. Grandpa's letter was framed on my desk, and I read his final line sometimes when I needed strength. The best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. I had dated, traveled, and built friendships with people who genuinely valued me. I no longer defined myself by my family's rejection. That chapter was closed. But one question remained open. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms, at Grandpa's grave. It felt right to have him witness whatever came next. They arrived separately on a cool autumn morning. Claire looked healthier than the last time I had seen her, still humbled but no longer broken. She had gained a little weight, and her hair was clean and brushed. Our parents looked older and smaller and uncertain, like children waiting to be told what to do. Claire spoke first. Her voice shook. I rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times on the way here. But there's no script for this. She paused and steadied herself. I see you now, Danielle. Really see you. I don't know if that matters after everything I did, but I needed you to know that the person who hurt you, I don't want to be her anymore. I'm trying to become someone else. Our parents apologized too awkwardly and imperfectly, but with what seemed like genuine remorse. Our mother said, "We failed you. We chose the easy child over the good child. We were wrong." I listened to all of it. Then I spoke calm and clear and unbroken. I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen. I'm not going to act like we're a normal family now. 15 years of cruelty doesn't disappear because of 1 year of effort. But I'm also not going to carry hatred forever. Grandpa warned me about that. He said bitterness would poison me. He was right. So here's what I can offer. We start over, slowly, with clear boundaries. I will not finance your lives. I will not tolerate manipulation. And if any of you fall back into old patterns, even once I walk away permanently, no second chances after this one. This isn't forgiveness. This is an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. It wasn't a warm reconciliation. It wasn't a happy ending from a movie, but it was real, and it was more than they deserved. Before we left the cemetery, I shared one more thing. I've established something called the Henry Foster Foundation, I said. It provides scholarships and mentorship for young people who are scapegoated by their families, the ones who are overlooked and blamed and made to feel invisible but who refuse to give up on themselves. I looked at Grandpa's headstone. He turned his pain into wisdom that saved me. I want to turn my pain into opportunity for others. That's the only kind of revenge that actually means something, building something good from something terrible. For the first time, my family looked at me with genuine respect, not because of the money, not because I had won, but because of who I had become. My father said quietly, "He would be proud of you." I nodded. "I know. That's why I did it." Weeks later, a new client visited my office. As we wrapped up our consultation, she noticed the crutch mounted on the wall. "That's an unusual decoration," she said. "Is there a story behind it?" I smiled, not a bitter smile, but a peaceful one. "It reminds me that sometimes you have to fall hard before you can see how to stand up. And sometimes the people who push you down accidentally teach you how strong you really are." After she left, I sat quietly for a moment. I looked at Grandpa's photograph on my desk, at his kind eyes and his knowing smile. "Thank you," I whispered. "I finally understand what you meant." I touched the ring on my finger, Grandma's ring, now mine. A symbol passed from one overlooked woman to another across generations. And that's how I stopped being the invisible daughter and became the author of my own story. Some chapters are written by others, but the ending was always mine to choose. Danielle's story reminds us of something we too often forget. Silence in the face of mistreatment is not peace, it is permission. Every time we stay quiet to avoid conflict, we teach the people around us that our boundaries don't matter. We teach them that they can take without consequence. True peace only comes when we have the courage to speak our truth and protect our own worth. But this story also teaches us something equally important. Strength does not require cruelty. Danielle could have destroyed her family completely. Instead, she chose boundaries over punishment. She chose to build something meaningful from her pain, rather than spreading more pain to others. That is the kind of strength that lasts. That is the kind of victory that doesn't poison your soul. If you have ever been the invisible one in your family, the one who gives everything and receives nothing but criticism, I hope Danielle's journey gives you hope. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. And sometimes the people who should love you the most need the firmest boundaries. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story like this one. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.